ballots and primary and runoff, early voting and runoff. So there are like 5 or 6 more deadlines that are going to have to be shuffled to move this election from June to August or September. I just don't know if there's even enough time. You know, we're saying August. There might not be even enough time to do that. And if you don't do it until late August or early September, then you're really handicapping the individuals who win the nominations, who are going to be on the ballot in November, to have meaningful time to campaign against the real opponent that they have on the ballot in November.
And so, Senator, kind of going back to right before you, or while you were holding the podium, but the senator from Berkeley talked about and was very honest and transparent, and I appreciate that, but he pretty much told this body that we have to get all this done before early voting starts, so we can't afford to thoughtfully look at the bill that has come to us from the House, knowing that we are the more deliberative body, and we can't entertain and discuss any amendments that make this bill better for our citizens. So pretty much saying we can't amend the bill that we know already is horrible because we've got to get this done before Tuesday when people start voting. But we know that if we don't make certain amendments, we disenfranchise voters. When this goes to the Supreme Court or wherever court looking at this, are they going to look at the fact that we intentionally and admittedly did not put safeguards or other things in this bill because we were trying to meet an arbitrary deadline because someone wants this done before the before the midterms? That's
a very important point you make. You know, the discussion you and I are having now becomes part of the record, okay? The comments, the very honest and brutally truthful comments from the senator from Berkeley are now part of the record. And part of the record is that he has actually advocated that we not seriously consider our roles of putting up good, solid amendments because it extends the timeline and therefore reduces the chances of winning in court. What's going to reduce the chances of winning in court is if the court says you didn't engage in a meaningful process. You didn't have a robust subcommittee process. You didn't have a proper public hearing notice. You didn't allow enough people to participate. And then, let's say you did. And then you advocate, just don't listen to those people. In other words, what the senator from Berkeley basically just told us is, regardless of what people said when they came out at the public hearing the other day and pointed out some things that would make this bill better, ignore that. Okay, you had the public hearing, but just ignore it. Because if you actually accept what they said at the public hearing that leads to an amendment, well, you know what? If you adopt that amendment, you're going to add a day. And if you add a day, you're going to worsen the court case. I think you've already worsened the court case by advocating that somehow adopting amendments is a bad idea. Amendments are designed to improve bills, to reach compromise on bills, to make sure that the best product we can have is out there on an issue. And so we will see how that goes.
And so, Senator, I guess I will start concluding. But to that point, do you recall how long we debated the DUI bill this year?
I think it was close to 2 weeks. I don't remember exactly, but it was certainly more than just a handful of days. The hemp bill as well. I mean, that meaningful legislation deserves deliberate debate. It deserves a consideration of amendments that will make the bill better or that will address concerns that maybe had not been thought of until something happens. And we are not engaged in right now in meaningful debate because we've already been told that no matter how good the amendment is, we should vote it all down because it messes with the timeline. It adds one more day to the process. I just don't believe that the courts are going to buy that. And I'll tell you what else the courts are not going to do, or if they do, it would be a first for the courts. It's not like when the lawsuit gets filed on Tuesday, or we probably wouldn't pass it till late Tuesday, early Wednesday morning. When the lawsuit gets filed, it's not like the court's going to call the parties into the courtroom on the following day and say, go ahead and make your best arguments right now because we've got we've got to do this. We've got to rule by Wednesday. They're going to do what they always do. They're going to read the petitions for original jurisdiction, and they're going to set briefing deadlines for the parties. And the briefing deadlines basically say, the petitioner, you've got whatever it's going to be, 24, 48, 72 hours, a week to file your brief. And respondents, after you receive that, you've got another 48, 72 hours a week, whatever the deadline is. And then the justices are going to have to read the briefs and the responses and then determine that they're going to have, I mean, I can't imagine that they're not going to offer to have oral argument in a case of this magnitude. By then, early voting is already into the second week. I mean, by then, literally hundreds of thousands of people would have voted, and the issue before the court is, do you enjoin the June election, which is now halfway through the early voting process? And I suggest to you that the chances of the court doing that, based on the precedents that are out there, Purcell and Alexander and those other cases that have given us a roadmap. I think I've heard the senator from Edgefield say that Alexander gives us a good roadmap for where the court's thinking is on this. And the court's thinking, I would suggest to you, is that we do not upset elections that are already that far in progress. It would be one thing if you and I were having this debate 2 weeks before military ballots went out, or 2 weeks before absentee ballots went out. But we're not. We're having this, we're now in a countdown of just a handful of days before early voting, which means military and absentee voting has already been taking place for over a week now. I just don't see our courts stopping this election, even if we passed it today, and which we can't, right? We know we can't pass it at the earliest probably until late Tuesday afternoon, early Wednesday, and if there's an amendment, it would go back to the House on Wednesday, go to the governor on Wednesday. Well, by then, 2 days of early voting has gone by. But that's not really the point that I was trying to make to you. Then a petition gets filed, and after that, a briefing schedule. And by then, more people keep voting. They're not going to enjoin the election to give them time to read the briefs.
Senator from Edgefield, what purpose do you raise?
President, I question the presence of a quorum.
Quorum has been questioned. The clerk will count. I'm informed there are 24 members. A quorum is present. Senator from Orangeburg continues to have the floor. Questions from the senator from Richland, Senator Devine.
Thank you, Mr. President. And so, Senator, to that point, I do want to ask you some questions about the process, because you were here in 2021, 2022, when the current maps were challenged and upheld, found to be constitutional. But to finish the point of the meaningful debate, whether it is THC, whether it is DUI, whether it is shrimp, whether it's how many fish you can catch, we tend to debate and have amendments and discuss processes. And I'm not negating the importance of any of those other issues. But Senator, can you think of any other issue that's more important than someone's constitutional right to vote and have their voices heard and counted, either in their representation or in being able to actually exercise their vote without obstruction?
I cannot, and I will tell you that it's just ironic that we've spent more time with the public and asking them what they thought about how many deer you should be able to shoot in a year than we've done in this, okay? We had subcommittee hearings, we had public hearings, we had full committee hearings, we had floor debate, we had amendments back and forth about whether the deers need antlers on them or not antlers on them and how many you can shoot. We've had a much more robust discussion about that than we have about this, because the timeline is truncated. That's not your fault, our fault, any Republican's fault. It just is what it is. The election was scheduled way back. I mean, it's just always been on the calendar. We always have the primary in June. We always have the primary in November. Since the early, I guess how many ever years ago that Alexander was settled, we knew that these particular congressional lines were constitutional for South Carolina, and nothing has changed that, okay? The ruling in the Louisiana case has not made our lines unconstitutional. You could somebody could challenge that in court, but they haven't, okay? They're using that as a pretext for us to move forward in a very truncated fashion here, and it really is sort of ironic that we would spend more time talking about how many fish you can catch than we would about your right to vote.
So, Senator, probably a third of us were not here during the last redistricting. And so, but I've gone and I've read all of the cases. I have my trustee, and the lawyer in me does a trial notebook for Senate as well. So here in my trial notebook, I have Alexander v. South Carolina. Well, that's the appeal. I've got the state Supreme Court. I have the U.S. Supreme Court, because that case actually went from our state Supreme Court to the U.S. Supreme Court. And then I have the Calais case here, which the Calais case actually also references Alexander. And so I've done my reading of these cases, and I strongly would encourage my colleagues to do the same.
And you can add the Purcell case to that, which is cited in there.
In the Purcell case, which I have here, and I brought my 3-hole punch to add to my book. So I'm going to finish Purcell, but I would strongly encourage everyone to read this so that we understand, as the public servants that we were elected to be, what we are doing to our state as far as making sure that we, and what we do and say here, can pass challenges, sustain challenges, and potentially expose our state to millions upon millions of dollars in litigation. But Senator, when the process, and the senator from Ori yesterday talked about the process that went through, so I won't rehash that. But I really want to focus in on the challenge that came. So when the challenge came from the NAACP and the League of Women Voters to challenge the congressional maps, it was all maps, but congressional maps specifically, as I recall, it was specifically Congressional District 1, is that correct?
I think that's right.
And so the pleadings and the allegations was that the state had racially gerrymandered the District 1 and removed specifically African-American voters from 1 and put them to 6, so that you would make 1 less African-Americans in 1, put more African-Americans in 6, and so that was the challenge. And so, Senator, what did the courts, let's start with the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court, what did the state Supreme Court say about that allegation and the state's assertion that those maps were not racially gerrymandered, but they were politically gerrymandered?
That is the basis of that ruling, which is why there are several on the Republican side who said that we've already engaged in political gerrymandering, which has been determined to be legal. You don't need to do it again when you've already done it. And others have said, be careful what you wish for, because if you go further in the political gerrymandering process, you cannot move Democratic voters to Georgia or North Carolina or just say they don't count. You've got to put them in some district, okay? If they're not in District 6, they're in 2. If they're not in 2, they're in 5. Not in 5, they're in 4, whatever. You can't, they're gonna get moved around. We know that statewide, there are about 40% of the people historically or recently have voted Democratic, and 50-something have voted Republican. You would think that our congressional delegation should mirror that, and maybe there'd be 4 Republicans and 3 Democrats, or 5 Republicans and 2 Democrats, but no, it's been politically gerrymandered so that there are 6 Republicans and 1 Democrat. That's about as much as you can do given the Democratic makeup of South Carolina. But these maps, the ones that is before us now, and the one that was submitted yesterday by the senator from York, make at least 3 or 4 of the seats competitive, whereas right now, in reality, only the 6th district is one that Democrats have a reasonable chance of winning. But if you adopt any one of these new maps, Democrats are going to have a chance in 7, 1, 2, and 6.
And so the state Supreme Court said, no, not racially gerrymandered. The people from the Senate and from the House who testified under oath said these maps are not racially gerrymandered, and the state Supreme Court said, we agree with you. And so then it was appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Correct.
Which, as a lawyer, I'm a lawyer, Senator, most cases don't go to. I mean, is it easy to get a case to go to the U.S. Supreme Court? The U.S. Supreme Court, for those who are not lawyers in here, the U.S. Supreme Court has to choose to take a case up. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if that's how it happened in the last time with us. We might have gone the other way around, because it might have.
Went to U.S. first?
It might have gone to the U.S. Supreme Court because it went through the federal district courts and then came back to the South Carolina Supreme Court. But you're right. The normal course is it would go from the state, from the highest court in the state to the U.S. Supreme Court, unless it got to the U.S. Supreme Court through the district court system, which I think what happened last time. But be that as it may, you're right that this time, I would predict to you that on Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday of next week, whenever we might wrap up, there will be a challenge made directly to the court across the street, which is the South Carolina Supreme Court. And they have to decide whether to take it up in original jurisdiction or not. And if for some reason they chose not to, then it could probably be filed in the Circuit Court of Richland County as the state court that would take it up. But I feel very confident that this is of such a magnitude that the South Carolina Supreme Court would take it up on original jurisdiction, but I don't know that they would do that without some semblance of briefings, arguments, and they're gonna think long and hard about enjoining people from voting. Okay, but let's say they did. How would that work? You had planned to early vote on Wednesday. If they issue an injunction, is there going to be a sign on the door that you can't vote today? I mean, how in practical terms? When you say I'm going to enjoin the election, people are going to be showing up to vote in the governor's race, which, I mean, assuming they aren't going to enjoin the governor's race. And then there's going to be real voter confusion because the ballots are already going to have the candidates for the congressional races on the ballots. Are we going to have the workers go into the machines and remove the congressional races from the early voting so that we just take them off? Or is somebody going to, when it's printed out, you go ahead and it's on the machine, so a lot of voters aren't going to know, well, I don't get to select the congressional race, so they're going to select it anyway, and the ballot gets printed, and that printing is now on there, and they get a chance to review it and then slide it into the device that counts it. I mean, it's a lot of confusion there because it gets back to one of your earlier points that you might think to yourself, reasonably so, I've already voted for Congress this year. I've already voted. So maybe I don't need to go in August because my vote's already in. That might have been for people who didn't vote in June. And so it's going to be real confusing, and the turnout in August is going to be abysmally low, extremely low.
And so, well, I'm going to follow up on that one, and I'll go back to another point. But to that point, if it's low voter turnout and, we've got a person who is running for Congress and they've been deemed the front runner and think they're going to win, and now we do all this changing, and then the low voter turnout, with all the conversations about stolen elections and fraud, do you think that there could be a candidate who loses for some reason and then they want to change or challenge the fact that this happened and that there was voter election fraud because elections got changed, polling places got moved, there were voter suppression? Is that even anything we should consider?
Well, I guess we have to consider it, but I mean, I bet if you were able to ask the congressional candidates right now who are running in June, are they ready to go forward with an election in June? Probably to a person, they would all say, yeah, we're ready to go forward with You know, we'd been planning on that. We'd raised funds for that. We've been knocking on doors for that. We got a whole campaign plan to win the election in June. All of a sudden now, think of all the things that could happen. Number one, the district you had planned to run in is no longer your district. Number two, the workers you had been using to work on your campaign no longer live in your district. Number three, all that money you spent trying to get people to vote for you in June in the district that you thought you were in, you've now got to re-educate them that they got to vote in another district. On top of that, what we've talked about is the place that they'll go to vote in August might not even be the normal place, because in a cost-saving measure of a single election, there may be an effort in many counties to combine polling places just because they might not even have enough election workers to hold an election in August. And if they do, it's going to be costly. We're going to have to appropriate millions of dollars to pay the workers, to pay to reprint the ballots, to pay legal challenges. It just goes on and on. And we can almost be guaranteed that whatever happens, I'll just use August for an example, whatever happens in an August primary is going to, high probability, create several runoffs, okay? Those runoffs are then going to you're going to have to reprint more ballots for the runoff. It's not like we used ranked voting. We do for some military ballots we do, but other ballots, you get a brand new ballot that's down now to 2 names, okay? You go on the original time you go to vote for Congress, there may be 4 or 5 candidates in the party of your choosing. But when you go back then, there's only going to be 2. Let me add something else that's totally confusing. If I vote in the Democratic primary on Tuesday, there's nothing to prevent me in voting in the Republican primary in August. And so there may be no Democratic primary in the congressional district that I'm in August. So I could go create havoc in the other district. I'm not advocating anybody do that, okay? I don't think that's a good idea. But you couldn't police it. I mean, there's not really, unless we put an amendment in this bill, and some have suggested that we should, that says if you cast a vote in either party primary in June, you are bound to only stick with that primary in August, which in a way makes sense because that's what you would normally have done in June, okay? In June, you can't go vote in the Democratic primary for governor and the Republican primary for Congress. But once you separate those 2 ballots, it's an independent primary. And in an independent primary, you can choose, you get to choose again, okay? When you go in June, they'll ask you, do you want a Democratic ballot or a Republican ballot? You choose that, you vote. When you go in August, they ask you that same question. They don't ask you, when you voted in June, which one did you vote in, and you're stuck with that. Unless we put an amendment in this bill, if we did put an amendment in this bill, they would know, because they could look at the rolls in June, and they would have a list of eligible voters in August who could vote in either primary. But I've been told that we're not going to adopt any amendments, and that would be a very common sense amendment to adopt. But if we're not going to adopt good amendments to make the process better, what does it get to? Voter confusion, okay? Because they get there what if you got there in August? You're a good citizen, you know there's an election, you don't know a lot about which candidate, but you know there's an election, and you get there and they say, well, there's only one Democrat running. The only contest is the Republican contest. We say, look, there's never an election that held that I don't vote. I mean, some people feel that way. If the doors are open, I'm voting, and that's the right thing to do. So they get there and they say, well, if you're going to vote, you're going to have to vote in this primary because it's the only one available to you. Some people are going to vote.
Absolutely. Or if I'm voting in June 9th because I really only care about, my chosen candidate for Attorney General.
Right.
And so I'm going to vote in that one. But if I had Attorney General in Congress, I had to vote in one primary. But then I say, okay, well, now I only have Congress. And so I can vote in the other primary because my AG candidate has already run.
Right. So to that point, if you vote in June and pick the Attorney General's race on the Republican side because there are 3 candidates, okay? So there's a chance that there's going to be a runoff. In the runoff, if you voted in the Democratic primary in on the first day to vote in June, you cannot vote in the Republican runoff, okay? And that probably is the way it ought to be for Congress, but unless this bill specifies that, I don't think it does, and we could adopt an amendment that says that, but we've been told we can't, it's going to just be more confusion, more confusion.
Senator, I want to circle back a little bit, because I do want to make sure that I'm clear, because I was not here a couple years ago, and many of my colleagues, a third of us, were not. And so the courts, U.S. Supreme Court and the state Supreme Court, upheld and agreed with our body's testimony that these current maps that we're operating under were not racially gerrymandered, but they are politically gerrymandered.
Right.
Calais case comes out and says, you can't racial gerrymander, which South Carolina says we haven't, but you can politically gerrymander, which we say we already do. And now we're rushing through a process with no public input, with no South Carolina people drawing the maps, with no due process, no amendments to get it done, and someone files a suit, and the court says, well, South Carolina, why did you go through this process? And we say, well, Calais lets us do it. And they say, well, Calais says you can't racially gerrymander, and you all told us under oath, and we agreed with you, that you're not racially gerrymandered, so why did you go through that process?
Exactly.
What do we say as a body?
I don't know how you say anything to that, because the courts have already ruled we're not racially gerrymandered, okay? They've said that. South Carolina is politically gerrymandered. So if that's the case, then what's the rationale for us redoing these maps? Because we got actually documents signed by judges saying that didn't happen here. It really doesn't make a lot of sense. And what really makes a whole lot less sense, if assuming that political gerrymandering means that you're trying to do it for a purpose of creating a greater chance that your party will win, what we're being asked to vote on here means that we're adopting a map that actually gives the majority party a less chance of winning multiple seats. I mean, it creates districts that are Republican plus 5, Republican plus 7, Republican plus 7, Republican plus 8. If you have paid any attention recently to the trends in other states, districts that, and look, that is a Republican determination based on the current president being on the ballot, okay? He certainly brings out a group of people who are non-traditional voters or who have not voted consistently. He's not on the ballot this time. Those people don't show back up. And that's why Democrats have been overperforming by plus 10 across the country. If we overperform by plus 10 here, we're going to pick up 4 seats.
So
that'd be a political gerrymander, but it would be like we wanted that to happen, and maybe we do.
And so if a court says there was really no catalyst to warrant this process at this time with you deviating from your normal process.
Well, that's a really important point, because the court may just say, we've already told you that South Carolina is not racially gerrymandered. So the Louisiana case doesn't really apply here because you're not racially gerrymandered. And so you can't even use that as a pretext for why the governor called us into a special session. There's nothing extraordinary about that. There's nothing extraordinary about the fact that we are operating under a constitutional map. If we were operating on an unconstitutional map, that might be extraordinary, but we're not. We know that. We know that in writing from our judges.
Yeah, so then what happens, Senator, and I've not gone through the process, but the process in 2021, I think the case actually the decision came out in 2024, is that correct?
I think that's right.
Okay. So that's about 3 years of litigation. And so what happens to us in the interim? If this is going on, but we have an election in August, you get some congressional folks, you got 3 Democrats up there and 4 Republicans based on the fact that we have a more competitive map, which I wouldn't be sad about, but needless to say, then these cases go on, and then the court says, You didn't need to do all
You
this.
didn't need to do that. You got to go back and rerun again under the old lines that we told you were constitutional.
And so
I mean, I
then
guess that's always a possibility that, you know, if they say we're going to let the elections go forward, but we're also going to let the court case go forward, and we'll call it like we see it, but you'll have the ramifications from our ruling whenever it comes down. It could come down after November, in theory. I don't know that our courts would let that happen, but I mean, if we're talking about in the realm of possibility, you're right. It could be, we may have to vote yet again if it's determined based on the lawsuits that we filed, if we pass something, that what's happening in August is not right.
And then the courts don't let that happen. If they enjoin the election, it doesn't happen. We go forward with June and then the normal November. But we have had this time, we're getting paid for Sunny Day. Our staff is being asked to be here on a Saturday and Memorial Day, the day in which we should be here honoring, you know, our fallen men and women who Sunday. We might be here on Sunday, and I would love to hear Pastor Jackson give us his sermon from the well, because I don't miss church. I go in at 8 a.m. So if we have to come in on Sunday, hopefully we won't have to come in till 10, and I can still go see my Pastor Jackson. But needless to say, we're here. We bring our staff in on Sunday, and then bring our staff in again on Monday, the day that we should be honoring our fallen men and women who have fought for this very right that we're talking about in being able to vote. And then a court enjoins all this. How much money do you think, Senator, the taxpayers of South Carolina would have paid at that point?
It's going to be millions. I mean, we've had estimates that this process is going to cost somewhere between $6 and $10 million. I know we won't know for sure until the bill comes in, but what we do know is that whatever the bill is, the taxpayers are going to have to pay it. I mean, even if it ends up being $15 million, we're going to have to pay it because it's our responsibility to pay for elections. And I mean, unless somebody thinks that there are lawyers out there on all sides who are going to work for free, and that's the ironic part, is that the lawyers that are doing the challenge probably are working for free. It's only the state that's having to pay their lawyers because we can't find any lawyers who are willing to volunteer to take up our case.
To that point, Senator, do you remember how much we spent in defending these maps that we're now saying we have to change mid-decade?
I know it was millions, but I don't know how many.
Would you be surprised if I asked, would you be surprised if we were told we the Senate, not including the House, but we the Senate spent about $6 million?
That is, I'm not surprised, but it is somewhat shocking that we would spend that much money on, and we did it, okay? It's shocking that we would set ourselves up to do it again when it's uncalled for. We would have, if somebody really wants to methodically and thoughtfully talk about redoing the maps in South Carolina, when we get back in January, you can introduce that bill. It can be referred to committee. We can set up public hearings around the state in February and March. We could take it up in April or May, and we'd be ready. Everybody would know they'd have a full year to campaign to get ready for an election in 2028. And that's what I would consider to be the normal process. And there's really nothing normal about every 10-year redistricting. Usually we do it after the census every 10 years. So doing it in between the 10-year cycle is not normal to start with, okay? But even if you were going to do it then, you would think you'd want to do it in a thoughtful way so that you're not rushing. First of all, you're not throwing one election out and then rushing the replacement election. We could do this all next year, and there'd be plenty of time for people who want to run under these new lines that might be even improved lines, maybe constitutional lines. But we would have plenty of time for that court challenge and a court to bless those lines that we would pass next year for the 2028 elections.
And actually, Senator talked about the litigation took last time 2 to 3 years. These are 2-year terms. Right. So if it was done through a normal process, any legal challenges could potentially be all resolved by the next time that these seats would be up. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then, Senator, I was looking, I just wanted to make sure I was remembering correctly, but
And to that, we could go ahead and reapportion our districts and the House districts too if we're going to do it. Because normally, we don't, assuming that there's a rationale for reapportioning the districts of South Carolina, that rationale ought to go all the way down to county council. Okay, that same rationale that applies for us redistricting Congress should apply to Richland County. Why don't they go ahead and redistrict right now? Because if it's an extraordinary circumstance that the lines that we have now are somehow wrong based on changes in population and changes in what the Supreme Court put down, I mean, nobody's calculated those expenses of whether there are going to be attempts in various counties to redistrict in between the census. Nothing to say they can't, though.
Senator, I was looking, because I talked about what we, the Senate, would have paid defending this, which is taxpayer dollars, but really talking about taxpayer dollars and litigation expenses. As I look at this case, the named defendants were Thomas Alexander in his official capacity as president of the South Carolina Senate, Merle Smith in his capacity as speaker, Howard Knapp as his capacity of director of elections. So Mr. Belangia, who's been here for 5 weeks, will potentially be a defendant in a lawsuit in the next couple weeks.
He didn't know what he was signing up
Sorry,
for.
Mr. Belangia. But Henry Dargan McMaster in his capacity as governor. So the House has lawyers or litigation costs. The Senate has litigation costs. The governor's office has litigation costs. Would that be correct?
It would be correct.
So when you're talking about the costs, all of these entities and the Elections Commission would have costs to be
Absolutely.
defended. So all of these would be wrapped into what taxpayers would be doing to defend a process in which we have really pretty much excluded them from, pretty much heard from, but everybody, the majority of the people that we have heard from have said, don't do it, or if you do it, don't do it now. But we're being asked to accept what the less thoughtful body, I'll say it nicely, the less thoughtful body has passed over to us, not question it, not amend it, pass it, knowing that it's going to be challenged, and say, oh, well, the taxpayers of South Carolina will just foot the bill no matter what happens.
There's always the possibility that the courts could say that the effort was so frivolous that we're going to make you pay not just your own lawyers, but you're going to have to pay the lawyers for the challengers as well, because they never should have had to challenge something that was as frivolous as what's before us now.
And then lastly, Senator, I know there might be some other questions, but I've really, it's just heavy on my heart. So I have to really just go into the fact that we are Memorial Day weekend. A lot of people, think of it as the first weekend of summer where they're grilling out, going to the beach and all that stuff. But, I always post and talk about how, although people do that this weekend, this truly is the weekend where we honor our fallen men and women. And I know many people who have family members who have lost their lives defending this great country.
Well, and not only that, many of us traditionally go to small towns and county events in our home counties where they're having Memorial Day services and ceremonies, and we're going to be right here missing those this year. But I mean, I'm not complaining about that, because if we need to work, we're elected to work, and we'll do that. And I said yesterday, and I hope people are listening, whatever you had planned to do for Memorial Day, please don't tune us in. Y'all go ahead and do what you had planned to do, because you're not really missing a whole lot. In fact, if you're having to, nothing against the conversation you and I are having, but I don't believe that we are that riveting right now that anybody should give up their chance to go on out and buy the steaks or the hot dogs that they plan to grill. Go ahead and do that, and enjoy your Memorial Day. And that's the point you're making, is it's not just a day of enjoyment. It is a day of enjoyment, but it's also a day of thoughtful reverence and respect being paid to military families, veterans, the fallen over the years, and every day that goes by, and we're almost on the tail end of anybody being left that fought in World War II, okay? But we've got veterans who fought in the Korean War, in the Vietnam War, and some of them, this may be their last day, or this may be the first day that their family has had to think about that they're not here. I mean, it's set up as a holiday. I mean, I think we usually think of holidays as a joyous time, but this holiday is actually a solemn occasion, one in which we pay respect and honor to people that have allowed you and me and the rest of us to be free and to come in here and debate in an open chamber, even if what we're debating doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Well, I will tell you, Senator, that the folks that have been coming on nightly on my lives, actually, I always tell them, watch us. And they do watch us, because even today, I've had people text and say, why did this happen? What happened? So people are watching. So I do think people will watch us on Monday because, Senator, this issue is so very important. It is about their fundamental constitutional right to vote. And so I guess the point I was making about, I think it's not lost on me that we will be here on the day that we are to honor our men and women who have made the ultimate sacrifice for this state, in this country, so that we could even be here in these chambers. But the action that we may take while we're here in this chamber may completely invalidate thousands of military ballots, men and women who are currently serving our country in conflicts across this world. And so I just would say that I think that your amendment that talks about education is the least that we could do to the people who have sent us here.
I agree completely. And to that end, think about the military service person, man or woman, who's overseas right now and has taken the time to study the candidates and learn about which candidate they want to vote for and has cast their vote. We're asking them, wherever they're stationed around the world, to try and come up to speed on brand new candidates who might be running in brand new districts that they'd never thought about. I mean, the idea that our military service people are just right up to speed about new districts and new candidates is part of the education process that needs to take place. We're going to need to allow time for them, if they're going to thoughtfully cast their ballot, to become aware that they're no longer in the district that they've always voted in, or the candidate that they had been supporting for years no longer resides in that district. He or she's been moved to a new district, or is no longer eligible to run in the district that they live in because they've been moved. Either the candidate's been moved or they've been moved. It really is confusion not only to the voters here in South Carolina, it's going to be particularly confusing to the voters who are overseas right now protecting us, because they're not going to have access to, I'm pretty sure they don't get those flyers in the mail. They don't see the billboards and the ads because they're overseas. So somebody's going to have to make a special effort to let them know what's going on before they can thoughtfully cast ballots under a new election. And to the point that that people do watch us, because it's you and me, we always know there are two, your mom and my mom.
I think the senator from Ori, I think his mom sometimes watches. I think he told me.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator. And I will say this, people in my live said that they will bring us some barbecue on Monday. So I think we'll have a little bit of fun.
Senator from Berkeley, Senator Grooms, what purpose do you ask, sir?
Mr. President, under Rule 43, I'd like to make notice of the ability to make a motion tomorrow to suspend Rule 15.
That is so noted.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator from Berkeley. Senator from Orangeburg retains the floor. Senator from Charleston, Senator Tedder, what purpose do you ask, sir?
See if the senator will yield for questions.
Senator,
I'd rather yield to a sign from the senator from Berkeley that now that we've done that, it'd be time to go on home now. In a few minutes, it might be time to do that. But yes, I'll yield.
Thank you, Senator. Wanted to ask you a couple of questions, and I appreciate, did you know, the exchange that you just had with Senator from Richland, Senator Devine, because I too have been trying to figure out why we were doing this. In fact, I asked a question in full Judiciary Committee if any of the proponents could explain to me why, and nobody could, but the public seems to think, at least on Twitter, that we have to because our maps are illegal, because they're racially gerrymandered. So I'm really appreciative that, and I hope that they paid attention to this exchange to know.
Because that's not true.
Yeah, it's not true. And if it were true, that means half of our members would have perjured themselves, did you know, in federal court when they testified that it wasn't.
That's right.
Right. So moving on from that, I did want to, did you know that there was a candidate, there were several candidates that testified before full committee, and there was particularly one gentleman, and I can't remember what he wasn't a part of the Republican or Democratic Party, but a different party. And did you know that the party he's running for Congress, he has to obtain 10,000 signatures to be on the ballot?
You know, I did hear that part of the testimony, and I think this truncated schedule makes his access to the ballot untenable. I mean, there's almost no way to get that many validated signatures if the filing for the new race is going to happen within a certain amount of time. And so, unless we put an amendment in here that says that the signatures you've already raised to get on the ballot in the June primary count for the August primary, which we don't have an amendment that says that, and apparently we can't take up amendments, then that person is not only going to be disenfranchised, they're going to have quite a lawsuit.
Oh, yeah. And did you know, Senator, that he is very close to getting those 10,000 votes, 10,000 signatures? But what he said and testified, and it was very heartfelt, he by himself, I mean, he's been knocking on doors, he's been canvassing a district that he plans to run in based on our current maps, which are constitutional. And did you know that the time that he spent to do that, it would all be wasted? But not only that, he testified that if the map, based on this new map, he will lose 4,000 of those signatures that he's already gotten.
I did remember that, didn't remember the exact number, but yes, it only makes sense. If you start moving people around, moving the lines, it affects not only the voters, but the candidates. Right. Candidates who used to represent County A now don't represent that county anymore. Maybe they represent County B, which they've never in the past had any relationship with. And you look at the new maps that we're being asked to consider, and we have people literally from downtown Columbia in with people from Rock Hill and other people from downtown Columbia equally as far away the other way, because the maps are running out of Columbia like spokes on a bicycle going in different directions. You got some people in Columbia voting with people in Pickens, and other voting for people in York, and then you got people in York voting with people in Pickens because one district runs across the top and one runs up the side and another one. Not saying that those aren't correct, but we've had no chance to have voter input as to whether that makes sense, or to have voter education as to how do you know which district you're in. There are probably people in Columbia who forever have been in the 2nd Congressional District. Certainly there are people in some counties that maybe have never not been in the district that they currently are in. But we're moving some of those counties this time. We're switching them around. And of course, we've created on the map that came to us from the House, created a district that does not have an incumbent in it. And we've got, which means that correspondingly, we've got one district that has 2 members, current members in it. I would venture to say that probably neither one of them are relishing the notion of having to run against the other, but I think they both have said that they will. And so we'll let the chips fall where they may with that.
Yeah. And as far as talking about just not even disenfranchising the voters or voter confusion, but for the candidates that are running, both Republican, Democrat, third party, whatever it is, they have spent, you talked about this earlier with the senator from Richland, the money, first of all, the filing fee. Now, I will say that in committee, that question was asked, what happens to their money? The director did say that those candidates, if drawn out of their district or are drawn into a different congressional district, and they choose not to refile for the August, they can get their filing fee back. But did you know that constituents have been reaching out to me and wondering, Okay, so they get their, so what happens to the money that Fred and Ethel and Jamal and Bernadette has given to the candidate? Their hard-working money. They wrote a $1,000 check for Mr. So-and-so to be their congressperson, and then Mr. So-and-so is drawn out of that district and can no longer run. Does Fred and Bernadette get their money back?
I don't know if they do, but if they were them and I was them, I'd sure be asking for it. And maybe there you go with another lawsuit. But this time the lawsuit's not going to be against the state. It's going to be against the candidate saying, you took my money under false pretenses.
Absolutely. So
you asked me to contribute to you because you said you wanted to be my congressperson, and now you don't want to be my congressperson anymore. I want my money back.
Right, and they have the right to do that. So imagine we're setting up all of our congressional candidates for personal lawsuits. And quite frankly, I couldn't be mad at Fred and Ethel for suing somebody. I mean, that's a lot of money. And I think their caps, do you know what's the max that congressional candidates can take?
It's a floating, because it's a congressional race, it's one of those that's indexed over time.
Gotcha.
So I'm not sure, but I believe it's in the 2000 and something
So
range.
it's more than $1,000.
Yes.
So I mean, that's even worse, and so the question is, if they want their money back and they have a claim, they have to sue the candidate. Not only that, what about the money that the candidate spent? I mean, imagine the candidate.
What if the candidate says, I've already spent your money?
Yeah, right.
Fred, you sent me that $1,000, but it went to buy a billboard in a district that you no longer live in,
Right.
and I'm sorry if you didn't see that billboard, but your money's gone. I don't think that's going to work as a defense, okay? The other thing is that people who are looking to find out who might qualify to be a plaintiff in a lawsuit need look no further than the ethics filings, because everybody will be listed about who they gave to. Everybody will be listed. You can find out where any individual is zoned to vote, and you could start asking those people, hey, do you want your money back? Because I'd be willing to represent you to get your money back.
Sounds like a class action.
What happens if the candidate says, we don't have any more money, or could it be that you get a judgment and now the money that you gave to the candidate doesn't actually go to the candidate, it has to go to pay off the judgment from the money that the other guy gave?
See, and I don't think nobody thought about those scenarios, just like I never thought, and I'm sure nobody in this body thought about the scenario of the gentleman who's going to lose 4,000 signatures that he walked all across a district knocking on doors to meet people. Nobody, and that's the problem that goes back to what you talked about being the process.
Right.
Because these are the types of questions that come up when there's a deliberative process, when there are committee meetings after committee meetings after committee meetings, going across the state, talking to the public, getting public input, which, by the way, was in the guidelines from 2021 and are not in the guidelines for 2026. Did you know? But I mean, those are the types of questions that we're getting on social media and having a rush to figure out. These are the questions and conversations that would have been held had we done this the right way, and perhaps this could have been all accounted for in this process to rush these maps.
Well, I agree. And think about the time and effort that many groups and parties have done to hold and host candidate forums, okay? They have rented buildings and invited the public, and the public actually has been engaged and says, I really don't know who I want to vote for. I'm going to go to the candidate forum, and I'm going to get a chance to hear them both or all three of them speak, and then I can make a better informed decision. Well, it turns out that the candidate forum they went to is for two different people that no longer are going to be there. The candidate forum they would have gone to is in another whole county that they didn't even get a chance to have, and there's not going to be enough time for all. I mean, think about all we all went through county conventions, county by county. We had conventions this year. Candidates came and spoke. They sent representatives to all of our counties. Think about all the fish fries and the events that have taken place to promote a candidate. And now you have, that money's just down the drain in some cases. Now, some counties used to be in District 2 and are still in District 2. But there are a lot of them that just got totally shifted around. So not only is it going to be money spent by us, the state, if you are in that class of folks who are asked to contribute to campaigns, you're going to be asked to, it's going to be a new cycle.
Yeah.
Which begs the question, is it a new cycle? If you can only collect, let's use the example of $1,000 for an election in 1994 from one person, and they've already given, but they gave to a different candidate in a different district.
That's a good question.
Does that count?
You know, that's a good question. That brings up the point that what about now we're essentially giving some candidates an upper hand over others because the person who stays in their congressional district, and I gave them $1,000, I maxed out, I vote for them in June 9th, I can't, even though it resets for, that was that cycle, but somebody who switched, they still have that money, they still have my $1,000, but in a different district, because somebody else now they're getting more money, but it's still the same account. I mean, do they have to get a separate account? Because we designate on the ethics what seat we're running for when we file these reports.
We put on there, you know what we put on there? The date of the election.
That's right.
And so when you raise money for an election of a certain, it says the primary, when will the primary be held, and when will the election be held?
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that means that the candidates are now going to be challenged for having filed or taken money under false pretenses or under a false filing. Maybe are they going to have to go back and amend all those forms? Yeah. Are they going to have to write letters to everybody who's no longer in their district and offer the money back? And what if they don't have the money because they already paid for TV ads that have already run and they've used that money? Are we asking these candidates to come out of pocket? But luckily, we're talking about congressional races where they make a whole lot more money than some other people make in elected office, and so maybe they can. Or are they going to claim back against the state? Is somebody going to somehow say, you're the one that called? If I was the candidate and I ended up with a lot of judgments against me by people that I didn't ask to leave my district, we asked to leave that district. Do we, the state, the Senate, and the House become defendants in yet another round of lawsuits by candidates who are saying, you caused me to have judgments filed against me by doing this in the middle of an election cycle?
Yeah, I absolutely think that's possible, and I think that's something that if I'm a congressional candidate, I'd be looking into that. In fact, I think whether it's a Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever party they run for, I mean, that sounds like a nice little class action to me. But
you know, I know this would be something closer to you in the chronological time than me, but you probably fairly recently passed your bar exam or had some law school exams, and that's one of the things that often is asked on a law school exam. I'm going to give you a scenario. Tell me what causes of action might arise out of this scenario. Yeah. And we're coming up with a myriad of causes of action that people have never thought about, and I don't know that they're barred. They're certainly novel because it's a new scenario, but I can see us creating more and more legal challenges than just the challenge of the maps, because now there's the challenge of the money, the challenge of the filing fees, the challenge of, did you spend money on, what if you had already printed out your flyers, get out the day of flyers that say vote on and you had planned to mail them out on the first day of June so that they hit the mailboxes as a vote next Tuesday, June. What are you going to have to do with whiteout, go in or stickers and put August on top of that?
And those are expensive, Senator. I mean,
not only that, if you had to actually hand do those, it would probably be easier just to reprint them, but that's just a wasted cost.
Yard signs. I mean, do you know how much yard signs cost?
A lot.
Yeah, I mean, and so many, a congressional district, my God. I mean, imagine how many yard signs that they have to put out. And then if it says, vote Dion Tedder for a congressional district, whatever, and then I'm gonna get moved to a different one. I mean, so now my signage is wrong, and with this tight window, there's no way for me to order in bulk.
Well, that's true. That's another thing is that some things, as you are running a thoughtful election, it takes time, right? You've got to cut ads, you've got to get videos. So if you now a new county has been put into your district, but you want to show that you're connected to that county, you may want to film some some interaction between you and voters in that county, show you you don't go get the chance to go back and ride in Christmas parades, not this year. I mean, you're not going to get the chance to go to county conventions, not this year. I mean, the traditional way of actually getting out and meeting voters face to face, because look, it shouldn't all just be electronic, right? I mean, there should be a meaningful opportunity, particularly in a congressional race, where a person who wants to know who's running for Congress to be able to go to a candidate forum and hear them speak, or at least have a chance to go somewhere where the candidate is going to be, to shake their hand, to talk to them, to ask the question. You might have one issue that's so important to you that you just really want to know what that candidate's stance is. It's not on their website, and you want to know. So you make it your point to go to the town festival that they've said, come meet me this day. I look forward to meeting you. This is not going to be time for any of that.
Right.
Again, voter disenfranchisement, voter confusion, cost, all of those things, just piling up one on top of the other. And for why? Under the wrongful theory that our districts are racially gerrymandered when we know that they're not.
Yeah, and that's the interesting part is that's some people's theory, but I mean, there's another theory. I mean, there's another factual theory that.
Well, there's theories and there's facts,
it's
right?
It's the 7-0. You know, we had somebody come testify. He said, look, whether it's racial, I mean, basically, regardless if it's racially gerrymandered or not, we just want 7-0. We just want 7 Republican congressional members, and that's it. We don't care about whether.
Well, there's a chance for that in June. All you got to do is everybody go in whichever district you're assigned to in June, you vote for whoever you want to, and there's a chance that all 7 of them could be, by November, could be. I mean,
and that's true because did you know today someone, I would assume they're a Republican constituent or whatnot, commented and asked on I keep saying Twitter, but I guess it's X now, said, well, what do you say to the Republicans that live in District 6? What can they do? And I said, well, quite frankly, the fact that this is a democracy, a Republican can run for the 6th congressional district. Did you know?
And do every time.
Yeah,
I mean, I have voted in the 6th before, or people that are in my district have voted in the 6th before, and I don't know that there's ever been a time that I can remember in recent memory that there hasn't been. I can't remember a time that there's really been an open contest in any of the 7 districts where there hadn't been a Democrat. Look, even in District 4, which is heavily Republican, there's always a Democrat running.
Yeah, and to the people that say, well, a Republican can't win, I don't necessarily believe that, because based on the arguments that were made in committee, did you know the fact that, I mean, the very few proponents that testified for this bill, maybe 3 or 4, I mean, their theme was the 6th is poor, and the poor people in the 6th congressional district, I mean, they can't catch a break. They don't get any resources. If that were the case, don't you think they would vote differently? Do you think they would continue to vote for somebody who's not doing anything for them? I don't think that's
I would also venture to say that if you ask if you're valuing this by the resources that are brought back in terms of tax dollars coming from Washington back to this state, the 6th probably gets more than its fair share.
Right. And then, interestingly, there kept being blame on, well, the 6th, the public money, and Senator from Richland actually made a good point, asked one of the speakers and said, excuse me, but do you know where the funding comes from in the state with regard to some of the things? And it's like, yeah, the state. Do you know who controls the state? I mean, it's not like if there's a lack of any resources, I mean, there's a super majority in both chambers, but
with a Republican governor,
right?
So I mean, it's not any congressperson's responsibility for their district to get industry, have jobs, have better schools. That's our responsibility.
Yeah.
That's the state's responsibility.
Yeah.
A state that is not 7-0, but it's 3-0. You're a House Republican, a House Senate, and Republican governor, and so to the extent that you got a problem with those type issues, you don't need to be looking at Washington. You need to be right here in this building.
Absolutely, and so I'm glad, just happy to point that out. But voters get really confused about that, and Did you know another concern is just realistically from a standpoint of protecting South Carolina, when we talk about the negative implications that something like this could do. If we were to go to a 7-0 congressional, 7 Rs, 0 Democrats, if and when the pendulum swings and the U.S. House of Representatives are majority Democrat, the president is a Democrat, how could you blame the Democratic president of the United States and the Democratic House from just leaving South Carolina behind when it comes to federal resources? That's possible, isn't it?
Well, I hope not. I mean, I hope we don't become so partisan that I hope we actually are going to be responsible and develop good policy for all. And I try to do that. I've had probably more Republicans calling me about this process than Democrats complaining about this is too rushed. Yeah. This isn't right. In fact, I had one phone call this morning. She said, I know you and I don't agree on a lot of things, but we agree on this, and I appreciate what you're doing because this is just all rushed. And these are conservative folks who said, I don't want my tax money wasted when we've got a legitimate map. We already got an election schedule for June. Why are you going to spend good tax money to try and create an election in the middle of August? And you know who's now going to be eligible to run in August that right now probably is not thinking about running? That's the candidates on the ballot in June who are going to lose.
That's right.
So if you're on the ballot for one of the other seats in June and you didn't get nominated for whatever it was that you're running, hey, usually you have to wait 2 more years to decide that you're going to run for a different office. Well, now we're giving them an opportunity to say, hey, you've got all this name recognition built up. Okay, you ran statewide. You got all this name recognition built up. This would be as good a chance as ever for you to move that over to a congressional race.
I didn't even think that's a good point. I mean, that's giving them a second chance. And another question was that people were asking me. They said, well, if there's all this hoopla about the maps are racially gerrymandered and we got to rush to do this, then why, somebody asked, why is it not focused on the state House of Representatives, or why is it just the congressional district? And I didn't have an answer.
There is no answer for that because what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If it's true at the federal level, then it's probably true at the state level. But we didn't see any rush, not from the fellows across the hall who started this process to redo their own. Oh, they were happy to leave what they had exactly like they had it. But let's move it all to Congress and create confusion there.
And did you know that the reason probably and most likely that they didn't want to move their election is because of the things we were just talking about? They've spent money, they've spent time, they've raised money, they've knocked on doors, and that would be very impractical. It would be very wrong to do that to them. But somehow it's okay to do it to all of these people running for Congress. It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. And think about the person who's answering the door when the doc comes and says, hey, I want to talk to you about the upcoming race for Congress in District 6. And they go, why do you want to talk to me about that? I live in District 2.
Yeah.
And they said, no, you live in 6. And they said, no, I got a voter registration card right here. It says I live in 6. Or, I checked the last time I went online before I even voted in June, and I put my name in there, and it tells me which candidates are going to be on my ballot, and I looked. And when I looked, unless which is another thing, I guess we're going to have to change all the websites and the search engines to make all of that match up. And think about candidates who buy a voter list. The voter list is,
that's expensive.
It's expensive and wrong at this point. Yeah. It will be wrong. There'll be errors in it.
That's true.
So, it is one thing after another, and it's now, not quite 4 o'clock. because I understand that 4 o'clock is the magic time in which I can make a motion to adjourn and be successful. But if I do it at 3:56, not a chance, not a chance.
That is odd.
4:01, we'll be ready to go because you know what difference that makes.
Not
I mean,
much.
I guess it's getting toward time for supper or people figuring out how long it's going to take to travel home. We surely couldn't stay here past 4 when we had a chance to only stay till 3:30.
But there's no substantive difference in that. I mean, it's not like, are we going to take a vote or something? I mean,
I don't know. You think Amendment 8 will pass? We could move on to another amendment, but I don't really. I mean, I'm enjoying Amendment 8.
Yeah.
In fact, I know what's in Amendment 8 now, and if we went to 9, I'd have to read a whole other amendment.
Well, I'll give opportunity for some other people to ask some questions, but Senator, I just wanted to thank you for your willingness to answer these questions, because a lot of this, I mean, did you know the public is very engaged on this? When I say there are people that I probably have that never get engaged, and they are engaged. They're sharing this information, and they want to know what's happening.
Now, let me tell you what I think is not being factored in. Do you know who's going to be more motivated to vote in August in a low turnout election than anybody else? Somebody who thinks they've been disenfranchised.
Oh, absolutely.
If you think that somehow you're being jerked around by the process, you're probably going to say, I'm going to show up.
Show you. Oh, yeah.
And so other voters may not. And so I'm telling you, a primary process in August, in a special election, in a low turnout election, is likely to field a different set of candidates than you might normally think would win, because there's going to be energy. There's going to be a certain energy, and that energy is going to carry over to November. And that's why these numbers where you look into these maps and say, oh, it's R+5 or D+2,
Oh, it's
that ain't
different.
going to matter, not this November, not when we're in a war that seems to never end. I mean, not when we got gas, and I had to fill up the other day, and it was
Almost
paid more than I
$6.
recently have remembered ever paying for gas. And I've got farmers just telling me how bad, and I know it is. I can look at the fields and tell that this, we've got drought in some areas, fertilizer prices through the roof. We don't have a competitive commodities market for some of the crops that they had planned to plant, and so people are upset. And when people are upset, the normal voting patterns don't bear out.
They don't have, and what's interesting about what you just described, all of those issues, did you know Republicans and Democrats and independents, hell, just South Carolinians, those are the things that they care about. Those are the things that people that's what they want to hear about. They want to know who's going to tackle these issues. But did you know that most of the statewide, it seems like the only thing most, at least in one party, like looking for policy platforms, and it's just, what kind of policy position is that? But nobody's talking about those hard issues that you just talked about, and I think people are upset about that as well, which will turn out more voters in this election.
And you're absolutely right. And if you think about what a lot of voters, particularly conservative voters, think about tax reform, right? They think about what could we have done to keep more money in my pocket? How could government be more efficient? Well, we debated a very good property tax bill this year. We increased the amount for the homestead exemption. We changed the years that you would be eligible for it. Really, we had a very substantive policy debate and sent a very good bill to the House. I don't remember, but I don't think it's come back from the House.
I don't recall it's come back either. And to that point, everybody. I mean, that was a bipartisan issue. And did you know I do on some Thursdays when I can, and we get out of here in time sometimes, I do a radio. I have my little segment. It's called the Tedder Talk. Did you know?
Tedder Talk here and live Tamika there. I'm learning. I'm learning.
And on the radio show, I just give updates, and it's a low country station. And did you know when I talked about the homestead exemption and what we were doing, because I'd have callers will call in and ask me questions, and I engage with people, and everybody, they were like, man, this gives us hope. Like, y'all are actually doing something that benefits everybody. And people were so excited about it. So the fact that the House didn't take that up, but they found the time to have us come back to do this, which, by the way, cost the taxpayers more money. that we're here now in a special session, but they didn't take up things like that would help everyday
Look,
citizens.
we earlier this year raised the possibility of suspending the state gas tax because gas is so high now. So let's just go ahead for a few months here, 60 days, because it was said that, hey, the war is going to be over, maybe next week, maybe the week after, but surely by 30 days it'll be over and the gas prices will come down. And now we know that it's gone on so long that even if it ended tomorrow, which doesn't look like it's likely, gas prices aren't going to come down in this calendar year. We could have had some relief for working families that have to get gas to carry the kids to daycare, to get gas to drive, 10, 20, 30. I have people in my district that commute out of my district to go to work because that's where the job that they have is. And, there are people sort of recalculating. I was getting, $2 more an hour to drive to Columbia to be a nurse in Columbia than in Orangeburg. But by the time I pay this extra gas, I should probably just stay home. Then I saved 2 hours, 2 more hours that I could be with my kids and not driving. But I was driving because I thought I had a chance of making more money and it was going to help my family. But now it's really not helping my family, it's hurting my family. Those are the things that people are thinking about, right?
Right.
Those people are not thinking about at home right now on Memorial Day weekend what district they're in.
Yeah.
And I don't know that anybody was sitting around thinking, I think I'm sitting in a racially gerrymandered district.
Absolutely
I don't think
not.
that was a thought that was coming across anybody's mind, but I do know this. I do know when I see those stickers on the gas pumps that say, "Thank you, Mr. Trump," thank you, President Trump, that's what people are thinking about, the high price of gas. They're thinking about the high price of groceries. My goodness, I went to buy something that I can't remember what product it was, but I said, I had no idea it was this much. Have you eaten out in a restaurant lately?
it's
and look,
everything.
not only is that gone up, we haven't seen it yet, but in a state that's based on tourism, you're going to see restaurant inflation, gas inflation, hotel
rates.
inflation. And then what are people going to do? I'm not going to go to Myrtle Beach this year. We can already know that the Canadians aren't coming. Okay, anybody. Look, we got the World Cup coming this summer. Supposedly, we got people traveling from all over the world here.
And they have to fly to get here, and airline tickets are about to skyrocket because jet fuel, because of this war. There's so many things that people are.
Unless you live in New York City, because the mayor in New York will make sure that his citizens get to go to the World Cup. He has 1,000 tickets, and they got a lottery. You can go for $50. Maybe that. Hey, that would have been something we could have debated here as well, but we didn't.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Senator. I appreciate it.
All right, so
Senator from Richland, Senator Walker, what purpose do you ask, sir?
If the senator from Orangeburg has the physical bandwidth at this point for questions.
I'm okay right now. I might need some more ice if I can get some more ice here.
So,
In this cup, yes.
so I'm assuming that's a yes, Senator?
I'm okay. Go ahead.
All right.
Senator, yield for question.
So, Senator, did you know
Senator, yield for
that
question.
I cut my teeth in elected office as a member of county council? Did you know that?
I was aware that you served on Richland County Council, and I actually served at a time where a lot of progress was made in Richland County. And actually, I believe we're the chairman for a while.
Yeah, for 2 years, and certainly you're right, there was a lot of progress, but I wasn't solely responsible for that. We had a great team from the elected officials as well as the administration to find men and women who bring their talents, who brought their talents to work every day for the benefit of the public. But Senator, did you know that I was elected in 2020, which is around the time of the last census? And within my first 2 years on county council, we had began looking at redrawing county council district.
Which would be the normal time to look at it.
Absolutely. In Richland County, it's probably a little over 400,000 people. That's about the size of the population. And it took us a little more than a few months, as far as that process, to redraw a total of 11 county council district lines. That's a few months now. And here we are talking about redrawing 7 congressional districts in a state with over, it's a little over 5 million people within, I don't know, what, less than 2 weeks?
Oh, I mean, in less than 2 weeks in a process that just gives short shrift to the whole notion of how it's supposed to happen. It's supposed to happen by us advertising that we are going to redraw the lines, us advertising that if you want to have input in that, you can sign up on this website and give us your ideas. You can come to this public hearing and give us this ideas. You can call your current member of county council and express your opinion about whether, you know, that you don't like it, the fact that your neighbor across the street votes in a whole other county council district than you. Y'all go to the same church, your children go to the same school, and it doesn't make any sense that y'all are in separate county council districts. And you get a chance to have that conversation. You don't get a chance to have that conversation in a truncated process of less than 2 weeks, and you certainly don't get to have that conversation when you're told there aren't going to be any amendments. I mean, you got no chance of, even if you have a great idea, doesn't matter, because somebody in Washington whose name, as far as I know, is nameless to us, has sent a map down and said, this is the pink, blue, green, and yellow that we want. This is the one we want. And if you change that, we're going to light you up on Truth Social like maybe some attorney general candidates recently got lit up.
Well, I don't follow that person, and I don't, at least on social media, I don't. But I have an idea of who you're talking about. Well, Senator, during my time on county council, when we redrew the lines, we would meet, or we met rather, with the cartographer, met with someone from the GIS mapping department, and that person shared with us as far as the changes in the shifts in the population, and also showed us what the maps or the new districts could look like. Right. And then there were also conversations held amongst us as individual council members, right? Because you had some districts that didn't see any growth and had to pick up additional territory. And then you had districts like mine, my former county council district, District 8, which grew significantly. And so we had to give up territory. And of course, as you know, once you begin relinquishing or giving up territory, it impacts other parts or other districts as well. And so that was a relatively lengthy process, again, just for a population of 400,000 people, whereas here we are, we're looking at redrawing 7 congressional districts. And I know I've not had any conversations with the cartographer prior to, say, this week's rather, subcommittee. Not subcommittee, I'm sorry, not subcommittee, full committee meeting.
Right. Well, and I'm sure when you went through that process on the local level, on the Richland County level, there were people who said, we think that the Blythewood area ought to all be in the same district. We think that Lower Richland ought to be in the same area. We think that downtown should have a chance to elect somebody who actually lives downtown. Yet we've got a congressional map that's been given to us that I think might even divide 5 points from Shandon. I mean, it splits Richland right into the heart of the city so that you've got people who right now are probably in the same county council district, in the same House district, in the same Senate district. They're going to be in 3 different congressional districts.
Well, you know, another difference that I think we should highlight, Senator, is that at the local level, you know, the law allows for some variance, if you will, with respect to the difference in population. I think it's about 10%, but when I was on county council, we tried to keep that threshold around, 5%. But it's my understanding when it comes to congressional districts, these lines have to be drawn accurate to the person. Are we confident that, the map that has been presented to us is in fact accurate to the person and in compliance with Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution?
If the data that we've been given is correct, and approximately 50 families a day are moving to the greater Charleston area, there's no way. Because the map we draw today will be obsolete tomorrow on that point. We are such a fast-growing state. I mean, Jasper County, there's probably another 10,000 people in Jasper County now that weren't here 2 years ago, okay? And you can go to other areas, particularly in the coast. And you just see, I mean, if you drive down I-26 towards Charleston, you just see these huge apartment, condo, subdivision complexes go up, that workers working everywhere. You know what? If you come back 6 months from now, what you're gonna see in the yards are kids' bikes, Gamecock flags, Ohio State flags. I mean, you're gonna see all of those things that are indicative of the fact that now there are people living here who weren't living here 6 months ago. So any map that we draw right now is not gonna be accurate to the person, which is, I've always found fault with that on the congressional basis, because to me, it would seem better policy to have a policy that you don't split precinct lines and allow for a variance that would, it wouldn't have to even be a large variance just to account for precinct lines, but I believe the map that was drawn for us in Washington, just in Richland County alone, splits maybe 10 or 20 precincts just in one county.
But Senator, isn't it true, though, that if you're going to draw a congressional map that is not, the numbers are not accurate to the person, that can be done, but there's an exception to that, right? And you have to, as my understanding, you have to satisfy some sort of redistricting policy, where there be the point you just mentioned, trying to minimize the number of split precincts, you're trying to minimize the division of towns, you're trying to minimize the division of cities, or either the division of county boundaries. So it can be done, but we would have to show, I'm not sure if that has to be shown here or has to be shown before a court, but at a minimum, there must be a showing that it was necessary to have that disparity or that deviance, right?
There is a process by which that could happen, but you know what that process entails? It entails lawyers and courts and time and money, and we're going to put that in when we already have a map that our court has said that is a politically gerrymandered map that meets constitutional muster, and it's good to go, and that map will be good to go until after the 2030 census. I mean, there's no reason to change the current map that we have, because it has been blessed judicially as being constitutional. And there's nothing about the Louisiana case that made I don't remember, and maybe I missed it, but was there a footnote in the Louisiana case that said, South Carolina, based on what we know, you need to it's not there. It's not there.
And I didn't mean to say deviance, I meant to say deviation, although some people may consider this map to be deviant, right? Yeah, but let's delve a little bit, if you don't mind, Senator, into the process. I know that's been talked about quite a bit, but I would like to, for you and I to have a little colloquy about that, if that's okay with you. Because again, this is my first rodeo with redistricting as a state senator. I know you've been through a number of these.
I'll tell you how far even back. I was a law clerk for Senate Judiciary following the 1980 census and helped draw the congressional district lines in the mid-1980s.
You trying to tell us your age, Senator?
Well, I will tell you that as far as the process, back then it involved a lot of scissors and tape. We would cut up the maps and we would tape them back together. And we would, you would say, and back then we really, really, really made an effort not to divide county lines. And I remember the first time that somebody took those scissors and sliced it through Berkeley County and said that part of Berkeley needed to go in the 6th and part of Berkeley needed to go in the 1st. And Senator Dennis was actually in the room. I thought he was going to throw those scissors at somebody. I mean, he did not like those scissors being taken to Berkeley County. But we had to at that time. It would have been, I think about it now, and you know where we met? We met right up in the 3rd floor conference room as a conference committee of 3 House members and 3 senators. And Senator Gressett and Senator Dennis were both on the conference committee.
Almost said Davis.
They were on the conference committee. And I actually was very fortunate to have been employed by a gentleman named Jim Fields, who at that time was the research director for Judiciary. And it was a long process that summer and talk about a process. Now that we've got computers and maps and census districts, you can do it a lot faster. In fact, so fast that we can just let people in Washington do it for us.
Now, Senator, it's my understanding that the way this process works traditionally is that a redistricting subcommittee is established, right?
Right.
And that redistricting subcommittee, one of its primary functions is to provide accurate and complete information about redistricting plans to the public,
Well,
right?
one of the first things they do is they develop criteria.
Correct.
And the criteria may be, to the extent possible, we're going to try and keep counties whole. To the extent possible, we're going to try not to divide towns, municipal areas. To the extent possible, we're not going to, if it's all possible, not divide precincts. To the extent possible, we're going to follow geographic boundaries like rivers or major highways. To the extent possible, we're going to keep communities of interest together. People like what I call the Tri-County area in Charleston, Berkeley, Dorchester, and Charleston. There are a lot of people in those three counties whose livelihoods are tied to the Port of Charleston. They work directly at the port, or they work in import, export, or they got some relationship to the port. It makes sense to have those people in the same district. But I don't think this current map puts Charleston sort of all over some in Charleston, some in, I think maybe North Charleston's in Myrtle Beach, and West Ashley's in, down with Jasper. It just, dividing that up, if you talk about a community of interest, those three counties, because of the way that so much of their economic activity is done, is based on being together. Just about as much as Richland and Lexington. I mean, traditionally, Richland and Lexington, there are so many people that live in Lexington that work in Richland. It just makes sense to have these two counties together. Lancaster and York makes a whole lot of sense to have those two counties together. Jasper and Beaufort. I mean, there are just a certain synergy between counties that have been adjacent to each other for the whole extent of the history of counties, that it just makes sense for them to be in the same congressional district. And because there are concerns that are different. People that live on the coast have maybe different concerns than people that live in the Piedmont or people that live up near the mountains. And that's why we want to try and have people that have some community of interest together in the same congressional district. But to the process, we hadn't had a chance to talk. I don't even know that Judiciary had a chance to fully vet all the possible considerations that could have been had for what the criteria should be.
So I want to stay on process, but if I can just for a second, just let me sort of deviate just for a second, because you mentioned something about communities of interest, right? So I'm not sure if you know this, or rather, Senator, do you know that the current map that is before us, it would trifurcate Richland County? Did you know that?
I did know that there, as I saw it, and I might not have it right in front of me, but it seemed to me that some people in Richland would go all the way up to like Pickens. Some would go up to Rock Hill.
Well, actually, no, some will go up to Oconee.
Oconee.
Yeah,
Okay.
some will go as far, and I know that's God's country, Mr. President. And some would go toward Pickens. That would be the congressional 5th. And then we have the congressional 2nd. Now, here's what's interesting about that, Senator. Greenville County is the largest county in the state, population-wise. And under this new map, it would be bifurcated. Charleston is the 2nd largest county in the state. Under this map, it would be bifurcated, right? But Richland County, which is the 3rd largest county, it gets trifurcated. Does that make any sense to you?
It does not make any sense at all to the community of interest of Richland County, which is the state capital, which has the flagship university. There's so much that happened. I mean, we got the medical core of medical services for the Midlands right here in the greater Columbia area. There's so many things that the people of Columbia self-identify as this city being together. And so even if you couldn't keep Richland whole, could you not at least keep the city of Columbia whole?
That's correct. And that's interesting as well, because the city of Columbia gets trifurcated also, right? That doesn't happen to Greenville. That doesn't happen to Charleston. And I love our sister cities, but I'm just highlighting the point behind just what appears to just be nonsensical and somewhat asinine to me.
Well, because it was drawn by somebody who doesn't know that, okay?
Yeah.
They're looking at numbers on a map and trying to move them around. They say for political reasons, but maybe they're the ones that are racially gerrymandered. Maybe this new map is the one that's being racially gerrymandered. We know the other one was not. So maybe this one was. I mean, we don't know because we don't even know the name of the guy who drew the map or woman, whoever it was. Or maybe AI drew this map, okay? We just don't know. But I know who didn't draw it, the representatives of the people of South Carolina who should have been drawing it based on criteria that their committee adopted and then input from the citizens who came out and testified and data from the mayors and the county council people of the various districts testifying, which normally would have happened. I mean, if you ask the senator seated right to your right there, who was at every single reapportionment hearing on the last go-around, he will tell you that the frequent flyers tended to be the mayors and the county council people. It's those people who showed up because they wanted to advocate for their area. Please don't divide my town. This town and that town are sister cities. We do so much together. We should be in the same district. And those are the types of things you would expect to hear in a normal process. You know what we heard on at the committee on, I guess it was Wednesday or Thursday, whatever day we heard, the judiciary heard this, was we heard testimony from about 50 people who on 24 hours notice could afford to take off and get to Columbia, all right? That means it's a really, really small group of people that even had the opportunity to be heard just because, A, you only had 24 hours notice, B, some people just, it was too far away for them to travel that distance, C, it wasn't sure. I mean, I don't know that it was clear to those people that if they came, they were going to get heard. And they didn't even have a copy of the map to look at to be able to give meaningful input to what the map was supposed to look like. Because that map, there were various versions. You can get a little one on your phone maybe, but you can't granularly look down in those maps to see, particularly when you're looking at the Columbia area. And if you're splitting, Dreher High School in one congressional district, AC Flora in another, or whatever it might be, I mean, you can't tell that from looking at that little picture on your phone.
Well, so it's my understanding, Senator, that it's to your point about this meaningful input, that the aim of the subcommittee is not just to provide complete and accurate information to the public, not just to allow the public to give input, but there's supposed to be a designated time period whereby the public, anyone, an individual, a group, an association can also, or a member of the General Assembly, can submit a redistricting plan.
Exactly.
That wasn't done here?
That's why we have cartographers and computers that can help, because maybe the committee members heard something at the public hearing that said, you know what, it was so compelling, we've got to make sure to the extent possible that Richland and Lexington are in the same district, or that Beaufort and Jasper are in the same district. And so let's go down and relook at how we could reconfigure this map to make sure that that community of interest is protected. There was no time for public they could come and say what they didn't like about what they saw on their phone, but they might have heard something at the committee hearing process that said, yes, that person's testimony was exactly right. That's a change we should make. Was there any change made? No. We just floated that map that came from the House straight on over, floated that map right on up here, have been told that no amendments are going to be taken. I mean, the senator from York put up a map yesterday that, quite frankly, I like better than the other map. I don't know that I like either one of them, but if I had to pick one, I would have picked his over the one we got in front of us. And that one got withdrawn. Apparently, we can't even consider that one.
Senator, with respect to the public, pretty much, their participation was circumscribed to a grievance fest. They came in and they stated how they felt about the maps, how they believed the maps would impact where they lived, but no one was allowed to actually offer up or introduce a map for our consideration beyond what came from the House, which we've already established came from someone outside of the state or came from Washington, D.C.
If you've ever, correct, and if you've ever been in what I'll call the map room before, sometimes you have an idea. I want to move these 4 precincts over here. Well, when the computer does that, what you see is a bubble created somewhere else. It's kind of like pushing, into a balloon maybe, and you push here and something else comes out over there. When you do that on a computer-generated map and you move people, it'll all of a sudden numbers will come and say, now this district has 5,000 too many people in it. And you can ask it, now with AI, what likely 5,000 people would you move that would adhere to traditional redistricting principles, following rivers and roads and not splitting precincts and keeping towns whole? If we shifted these 5,000 people in, which 5,000 people might have a community interest to an adjacent district to move? And we could do that. We've had no chance to do that. We've had no chance. We, the members of this body, D's and R's together, have had no chance to do anything because we're being dictated a map from Washington that has been said, this is the one you're going to pass. Go ahead and pretend to have a public hearing. Doesn't matter what they say at the public hearing because we're not going to give you any time to react to what the testimony is. In fact, on the same day that we have the hearing, not just the same day, within the same hour that the public testimony closes, we're going to send the map forward. That's not the way it normally works. I can tell you, having been through these, the way it normally works is you receive the information at the public hearing, you go back to the map room, you try to make adjustments to accommodate what you've heard. If you think what you've heard makes sense, you come back and you have another meeting and of course, it's usually a subcommittee at that point, not a full committee.
Right.
Where we do on any bill, some of our best work is done at subcommittee level because you get a handful of members that are dedicated to really digging into the issue and studying it. Not that the rest of us aren't fully informed, but the subcommittee, and then it goes to full committee, where we've got an entire half of this body at the full committee level. But first of all, there was nobody on the subcommittee, so the 23 on judiciary, they got to listen at the committee here, but they didn't get to respond. I mean, they didn't get a chance to take in what was said and make a meaningful effort to amend. I don't even think any amendments were taken up. I mean, you know how unusual it is not to have an amendment taken up to a reapportionment map? I mean, there's always got to be a bill introduced, right? And usually when that first map comes out and people look at it, and then some people go, I like it, I don't like it, I like it, I don't, here's why, and you go to the map room. Or you get together with the members of the subcommittee and say, have y'all thought about this? And they go to the map room. And it's drawn and drawn and drawn, and then whoever made the reference to you either own the train or you're not, it's Senator McConnell saying, or at least I attribute it to him, that I'm going to give you all the time you need to start drawing maps, but as we get close to whatever, it's kind of like when the senator from Gaffney says we're going to cut off amendments on the budget, Senator McConnell would tell us the train was leaving the station and you either on or off, so make your last pitch or not, and that's the way it normally works. And Senator from Richland, let me say this, I know that we're going to end at 4, and I want to take a few questions from the senator from Beaufort, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Senator from Beaufort, what purpose do you rise, sir?
To see if the senator will yield for some questions.
Senator, yield for questions.
I will. I was tired of looking that way anyway.
Your neck was kind of crooked, so I wanted you to be able to turn this way.
Now shift
Senator,
my
I'm
weight
going
to
to
the
take
other foot.
advantage of the fact that, I've got a first-class legal mind at the podium for 50 minutes, so I don't know what you charge per hour, but I'm going to get my 50 minutes worth. There are a lot of things, did you know, that I don't think we've had time to look at. We've talked about regular order. We've talked about the factors that are considered when you do redistricting properly. One of the things we haven't talked about yet, which I think is significant, is the Voting Rights Act. And I want to talk with you a little bit about that for a moment. Are you familiar with the federal court or Supreme Court case of Thornburg versus Gingles?
I mean, in general terms, I've read most of them, but by name now I can't tell you that I know the holding in that case.
Let me tell you that particular case, if you are doing a redistricting that impacts minority voting strength, it requires certain things, but there are certain preconditions. The minority representation or minority in that district needs to be significant. Would you agree with me that currently 45.9% African American in the 6th district is a significant voting bloc.
It is.
Okay, and one of the other tests is that you have to show there's a historical tendency for that group to vote more or less cohesively. I mean, not in uniform lockstep, but cohesively. Would you agree with me that 45.9% that's in the congressional districts, this congressional district, more or less votes cohesively, at least in terms of those parameters under Gingles?
I think you could historically look at the data in that district and you would say that that's true.
Okay, and did you know that the Gingles case, that if those things that I just said to you are true, that if you were doing redistricting that is going to affect that particular minority representation, so let's stop there for a moment. Would this new map that's being proposed affect that 45.9% black representation in the 6th congressional district? Would it affect that number?
Yeah, it will, based on the lines that were given to us by the House or
So did you know that
Washington.
that the Gingles decision then says that if you are in a district where there is a significant minority, and if that minority historically has voted cohesively, and if your redistricting map is going to impact or impair or lessen that effect, that you must conduct, and talk about the legislature and in the course of doing its lines, it must, quote, do a demographic analysis, a vote and pattern analysis, and legal review. Did you know that none of that has been done here? That there was no Gingles analysis done over in the House in regard to under the requirements of the Voting Rights Act. The senator from Horry admitted that there was no analysis done. So would you agree with me that on its face, I mean, aside from the other arguments that, you know, can be made in regard to this 14-day process and it being, I mean, truncated isn't a strong enough word, but in addition to that, we haven't talked about this violation of the Voting Rights Act. And so I wanted to draw that to the body's attention because there's just so much about this. And I'll plan to talk on it a little bit tomorrow in terms of what I believe to be the flaws in this.
Well, I think one of the things you're pointing out is there's not just one basis on which to challenge this map. There's going to be a myriad of reasons that, I mean, from the military voting perspective to the timeline, to the process, to the analysis that should have been done, to the lack of public input. I mean, the courts are going to have a Christmas tree of ornaments from which to pick from to say, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem.
And one thing that I think is particularly unique about this map is that everybody concedes, acknowledges, both on the record, off the record, wherever, that this map was drafted by one man for the Republican Redistricting Trust, that map was accepted wholly, that it was not amended whatsoever in the House,
Right.
was not amended in Judiciary Committee, has not been amended on the floor of the Senate. So would you agree with me that there are certain federalism principles at stake here? And that, would you agree that the United States Constitution gives the state legislatures the power to redistrict congressional lines? Is that correct?
It is, and that's what surprises me in this case is that we are such a proud state that prides ourselves in the ability of ourselves to govern ourselves. The fact that we are even contemplating ceding something as important as redistricting to somebody who doesn't even live here without any analysis is very troubling.
I mean, again, I've lived in South Carolina for almost 50 years. I wasn't born here, but I've lived here for 50 years. And I think I understand South Carolina, and I understand its political DNA. And are you as surprised as I am that those that jealously guard those state sovereignty powers, those things that the Constitution reserves unto the state and the people respectively, are you surprised that some individuals who have long championed those particular federalism principles and those particular principles in regard to states being sovereign and only given the federal government powers to which they're expressly given, are you surprised about their willingness, maybe even eagerness, to give to the executive branch of the federal government power over the drawing of our state's congressional lines? I mean, can you walk me through the rationale behind that?
Well, I don't know that I can explain it. I think I understand it, but there's a, I don't even want to say a fear factor, but there are some people who are just who will privately come up to me and say, I wish we weren't doing this, but I just don't want to be the topic of Truth Social or whatever the device is. It's a hassle I don't need. But to me, really, you're going to give up your inherent right as a South Carolina senator to do what we're supposed to do because somebody asked you to on a truncated timeline? I mean, that is, I don't understand it, number one. It's very bothersome to me. It is certainly a product of the times we live in terms of social media and the way that people react. There would have been times in the past where the only way that you would have been contacted by somebody in Washington was with a telephone call. And now they don't even have to call you. They can just move their thumbs and put things out there, and they can get 50 people in your district to call you, and those people have no idea why they're calling you except that they were told to call you.
Did you know that a lot of individuals who initially contacted me in regard to the vote that I cast in regard to the sine die resolution, not to include in that sine die resolution the coming back for the drawing of lines, wrote me and expressed consternation about that. And did you know that subsequently I then communicated on 2 different occasions and said, this is the reason why. We're being asked to do in less than 2 weeks what properly done takes 2 years. We are being asked to accept a map that nobody here understands, and we did have a chance over in the House to get the map maker, Mr. Kincaid, to testify. Do you know how long he testified before the House of Representatives Subcommittee?
I don't remember how long it was.
7 minutes and 40 seconds.
Wow.
And did you know that at the beginning of his comments, he said, I can only be here for a few minutes because I have a scheduling conflict and have to leave, so I can't take any questions. So did you know that over in the House of Representatives Subcommittee, Mr. Kincaid testified, and I've got the exact, I had my staff look this up, from the 37-minute, 58-second mark to the 45-minute, 38-second mark. So that's 7 minutes and 40 seconds.
It took no questions.
Took no questions. Said he would take no questions, and then got up and left. Didn't even come to the Senate Judiciary Committee. So how in the world can we as legislators cast an informed vote in regard to one of the most important things we're supposed to do, congressional redistricting? We have no idea whatsoever what demographic analysis was done, what sort of variables or criteria was put into the algorithm. We don't know. We're simply taking, and look, I think the people of South Carolina need to understand this. We have been asked to take a map that has been generated up in Washington, D.C., delivered to us a couple weeks ago for the first time. It was like Christmas morning around here when they passed the maps out. Everybody was getting the map and looking at it to see what they look like. We've heard about this map, but now here it is. And
I do remember that.
A lot of excitement.
They were kind of lined up to get your copy of the map.
Get your map. Here's your map. And so how in the world can we discharge our obligation under the state constitution and vote yes on a map where we don't know how it was constructed, why it was constructed, the implications of what we can't possibly make that decision. And so how I mean, I get it. The President of the United States is asking people to do it. But is that enough to cast a vote that you can't do? You're not informed.
Well, first of all, there is the principle of federalism, and it's not his role. Our Constitution doesn't say that the president gets to draw the maps. It says that we, the representatives of the people, get to draw the maps. And I'm sure your constituents who called you maybe initially upset once you explained it to them, probably, I don't know what percent, but a high percentage of them backed off and
They
said,
did.
I didn't understand.
They said, wait a minute, I didn't know that this
know
map
that.
had been given to you all and you didn't know where it came from. I didn't realize that you were doing something or being asked to do something within 2 weeks that ordinarily properly takes to survive constitutional challenge a couple of years. I didn't realize all of that.
Sure, and you know how much more calls would have been generated if Beaufort County had been split into two or three ways? And so think about those senators in counties now that have been put there. They've always voted in one district and they've been moved to another one. Those people are going, why? I love people up in the mountains, but I've only been there twice. I mean, what in common do I have with somebody who might represent me from up there? I'm part of Greater Columbia. I need to have a congressperson that will advocate for us. We need a new airport, or we need a new roads. We need new business. I want somebody who's going to advocate for me. We got people spread all over the place. Now, it's always going to be a case where there could be some counties in a district that seem fairly remote from the district. But traditionally, we've got two coastal areas. We got the PD area. We got upstate area and the Midlands area. And this map does not adhere to all of those. It does, in a way, adhere to a greater PD, except I guess I would never, in my mind, have put Lancaster in the PD. But I think you would concede that as the coast grows, as your area grows, that probably what's good for Beaufort is good for Jasper. And I'm sure that the people in the greater Charlotte metropolitan area probably think what's good for what's good for Lancaster is good for York, okay? And people here in Columbia, Lexington and Columbia kind of go together. But this map makes no attempt to keep all of those areas together. And what really is confounding to me is the Charleston area, which, traditionally Charleston's congressperson was very focused on the Navy base, on the military, because Charleston was a strong military town. As we've gotten away from several of the military missions in Charleston, it's now become, with Boeing, with the port, it's been a whole different hub. But it's still, the people in North Charleston and Charleston tend to work at the same plants and businesses. Their kids go together in the same schools, play in the same conferences. How are they getting split so that part of Charleston goes all the way to the North Carolina line, and the other part of Charleston goes all the way to the Georgia line, and yet you got people that live across the street from each other going two different directions? That doesn't make a lot of sense. I just use Charleston as an example because, to me, that's one of the most egregious examples of how the lines have kind of scooped in and taken out a part and then moved and taken out another part. But to your point, people hear something on social media or read it or hear it on the news or whatever, and they react and they call you. And thank goodness you thoughtfully can take the time to respond to them, to put something out on your social media to say, look, did you think about this or did you understand this? I have found that most of the times if I have a chance to explain to somebody who may even call me somewhat irate, that they pretty quickly back down when they figure out, I didn't know that part. I was not aware of that. And that's the whole idea of a structured process of reapportionment is we would have time to educate our citizens about the process. They would have time to educate us as to what they consider to be appropriate. In this case, when the map sort of comes down from on high, take it or leave it, it does create, and look, we live in probably one of the most divisive times ever, and I attribute a lot of that to social media and people's attention spans and all that. I mean, we can get into a myriad of factors of why, but that shouldn't change a deliberative process that has developed over time, which is a bill gets introduced, criterion get developed, a subcommittee meets, public hearings are held, input is taken. You go back to the drawing board, you assimilate the materials that you receive, you reconfigure the maps, you put them back out, you have people comment, and you're never going to get everybody exactly happy, but at least they're going to feel like they've had buy-in. In this case, I don't know anybody in this chamber who feels like they got buy-in because we didn't have a chance to go to the map room at all, and we're told that if we did, we're not going to pass any amendments.
One of the, and I haven't been able to persuade everybody that I respond back to because and I'm going to give you a good faith recitation of the argument pushing back against my position, is that understand, Senator Davis, what the U.S. Constitution says about state legislatures drawing lines. Understand about the centuries of U.S. Supreme Court jurisprudence that says how state legislatures should go about drawing those lines. Understand what the Voting Rights Act requires and doesn't require. However, this particular election in November and the need to pick up at most, at best, one additional Republican seat justifies throwing all those things out, justifies throwing out constitutional precedent, justifies throwing out constitutional structure, justifies throwing out what's required by the Voting Rights Act because it's so important to get that one vote. And then we can go back and we can go back to the regular order again next time around. But did you know, here's my concern, Senator, that something once damaged, something once eroded, something once ignored, it's going to happen again. I mean, the precedent is frightening to me because it strikes at the heart of what I think Madison was a genius at constructing, which was the horizontal and vertical dispersion of power. At the federal level, the horizontal dispersion, as you know, between the three federal branches, but equally important, the vertical division between the federal government and the state government. And what my concern is long-term for this republic, and I don't think I'm speaking melodramatically here, is that we have gotten into a pattern, both in Congress for sure, of branches ceding powers to the other. I mean, the exodus of power from Congress, you know, from imposition of tariffs to the declaration of war you have it. They've essentially deferred to us being run by executive order in regard to things that historically we never would have thought were executive powers. And so I don't think Madison ever envisioned a scenario where an institution would not be jealous of its powers, that an institution would I guess one of his suppositions was going to be that each institution would be jealous of its powers and prerogatives and always check and balance the other. Did you know it concerns me that that logic breaks down if you in fact have a branch that is more than happy to cede those powers because they don't want to take the tough votes. They don't actually want to do the job of legislating. What they want to do is get a clip that goes viral so they can raise money and get reelected again. And so I've watched from afar that happen in Washington, D.C. with chagrin. But I watch with even more chagrin when it's happening in my own backyard now, when I see not only the horizontal separation of powers breaking down, but now the vertical ones. And did you know that I always thought that South Carolina, and that man on the podium up there, John C. Calhoun, was the biggest proponent for this, is that integral to our republic is having sovereign states that stand up for themselves and protect their rights. And we've always had that in our DNA, haven't we, Senator?
We have. I mean, if we're not going to do that, then we might as well just, instead of having 50 legislatures draw the line, why don't we just have all the maps drawn in Washington and they can cross not only county lines now, just let them cross state lines. So let's just draw 435 maps across the country. I mean, that's in essence what we're getting at if we're going to let Washington start drawing the maps in every state.
And you know, the thing is, actions have consequences. Precedents have consequences. Deference once given is hard to get back. And so I get it. I get those who are passionately believe that we cannot let Democrats take control of Congress. I don't want, be frank with you, I don't want the Democrats to take control of Congress, just like you would prefer.
Out of the barn.
Yeah, I share that objective, but at what expense? Because on the one side of the ledger, we've got one potential vote,
Right.
and on the other side of the ledger, incredible damage is being done to a structure that has stood us in great stead and has been admired from around the world in terms of our separation of powers and our ability to have a constitutional republic and our ability to have peaceful transfers of power, and has made us the most prosperous nation in the history of mankind. And we can't pretend we can ignore all that and burn all that down to get maybe one vote, and then think you can restore it all in 2 years.
I will say to that, generally speaking, once you go somewhere, going back is a pretty tough, it's a pretty tough thing to do. Because I suggest to you, if we cede the map drawing authority to Washington one time, I mean, why aren't we going to do it next time?
Because the same dynamics are at play, right?
Right,
You've
right.
got a very powerful office with access to almost unlimited funds with various affiliated PACs. You have the ability to go onto social media. You have the ability to threaten legislators with legislative challenges and primaries if they don't fall in line. I mean, all of those things are going to be in place going forward. And the only bulwark against that is for states to stand up and say, no, this is our prerogative. These are powers given to us. You don't have the right to come in here and do that. And once given away, and make no mistake, we're giving it away. Does anybody in here think that this map we're maybe going to vote on has anything to do with what the South Carolina State Legislature came up with?
And I don't think anybody believes that because we didn't draw it.
No, nobody's arguing that. Nobody can argue that. And expediency may be justified in certain times. For instance, Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus. That was an obvious suspension of a constitutional principle. I mean, it was. I mean, I think. I mean, and so he committed, or he violated. I think he could arguably violate the Constitution. I mean, in that case, but in that case, I think you had more compelling reasons than to pick up one particular potential vote in Congress.
Well, we were called back here under the supposition that this was an extraordinary circumstance, that something extraordinary had happened, like one Supreme Court case came down, and it was extraordinary. It's not that extraordinary. Supreme Court cases come down all the time that affect the states, and they assimilate that and make adjustments in due time. That's how we always react to whether a federal law gets passed, to whether a treaty gets signed, to whatever it may be.
Let me say this, because I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I don't want to lose the thought.
Yeah.
But you're right. That's why we're back here, is because of the Calais decision. And did you know that in my district, in Beaufort County, the executive committeeman for Beaufort County sent out an email to everybody in Beaufort County, all Republicans, I mean, more than, saying we had to come back up here because the Calais decision made our congressional districts unconstitutional. Set that on its face. And I contacted the person and say, here's the Alexander decision. Here's the Calais decision, which approvingly cites the Alexander decision. What you've put out there is factually incorrect. And you know what she sent back to me? She sent back to me a response that she had typed into ChatGPT, and she put it verbatim into a letter that she mailed out to people, saying that the 6th Congressional District back in the 1990s was a crescent-shaped district that was a black majority district that was racially drawn, and we need to undo it. No mention whatsoever of the 2020 census. No mention of the 2 years of work done by this man right here, senator from Horry, this man right here, senator from Beaufort, Charleston, senator from Edgefield. 2 years worth of work to redo the maps so they were not racially based, and then found by the Supreme Court not to be racially based. And yet the reason we're here, the reason for all this hullabaloo, is because of the misinformation put out there that the Calais decision somehow mandates that we be here. I mean, this is all predicated upon a lie.
No doubt about it. I mean, and I hope everybody heard what you said. I mean, we have a current map that is gerrymandered for political purposes, and that has been stamped to say you can do that. Okay, you can do that, and we did that. I'm not saying I like that, but that is what the law is. When the Calais decision came down, it even cited to us saying, what South Carolina did,
This is how you do it.
You can do it.
This is how you do it.
Right.
And look, and let me just say this. Blue states do this where they're in control of the state legislature, and they play rough and hard, and they look at partisan drawing, and they do that. We do the same thing here because those are the rules of the game. We may not like it. We may think that those are the rules of the game. And we played them hard here in South Carolina after the 2020 census, because as you'll recall, but I think a lot of this is important for the public to hear, that from a Republican standpoint, one of the motivating factors was that Congressional District 1, for the first time in 30 years, had been won by a Democrat, Joe Cunningham. He won in 2018. He won by a couple votes or a couple points over Katie Arrington. One of the animating objectives of the redistricting after 2020 census was to get the first congressional district more competitive for Republican.
There's no doubt about it. That was certainly I mean, the idea that we had 2 Democrats in Congress was something that hadn't happened in two decades maybe, and that people wanted to change it.
And so to their credit, though, and what's ironic, what is amazing to me is that some of the people being excoriated out there as being rhinos, from Charleston, some from Horry, some from Edgefield, are the ones that got into the trenches, not only for the 2 years worth of redistricting, but then for the 2 years of litigation that followed that, in terms of hours of depositions and having to testify in federal court and upholding our maps. And we won. We won. And as a consequence of that, did you know, Senator, that CD1 now is a so-called as a plus 10 Republican district, as opposed to being a district that Joe Cunningham won in 2018. And so I guess the point I'm making is, what are we squeezing? What more juice do we want out of this? I mean, Florida is now just getting to where we are in terms of their percentage of Republicans in Florida and the percentage of congressional seats they have. They want to get where we are. Same with Texas, same with Alabama. I mean, our sin, if it is one, is actually doing the work that the Trump administration is asking states to do now. We did that work 5 years ago.
No, I agree with you. And if you, again, I don't necessarily, I wish all seats were competitive, because I think that makes us stronger if we've got competition, real competition, not just in the primary. But that ain't going to happen just because of demographics or where party affiliations lie across the state. But if 40% of South Carolina in a statewide race, 40, 42, 43 vote Democratic, you could argue that we ought to have 42 or 43% of the congressional districts, and we don't. We got about 16%. I mean, so to the fact that a great job has been done from those in control, it happened. And if it was wrong, instead of being cited in the Supreme Court case, there would have probably been a footnote in the Supreme Court case that said, by implication, we overruled the Alexander decision in South Carolina because this case trumps that case. Not only did they not say that, they cited with approval Alexander as a basis for why the ruling in Louisiana could be done.
I want to, in the minutes we have left, I want to take you down some hypotheticals. Let's assume that on Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever it is, let's assume that these maps are passed by the Senate, signed into law by the governor. At that point, early voting's underway, let's say for a couple of days, for the sake of my questions here. What happens? All right, so somebody files an action in state court to do what, or somebody files an action in federal court to do what? Play this out with me for a little bit.
Well, I think in state court, you're going to have an action filed in the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, which decided Alexander, basically asking them to apply Alexander to this new map and say that it's not going to, it doesn't meet the challenge of, it doesn't make any rational sense to change a map that had been proved by Alexander. But I think the challenge is going to come from several potential areas. One is going to be that the military votes are being disenfranchised. One is going to be that the timetable creates voter confusion and we shouldn't stop an election that's underway. I mean, there is some federal case law about the fact that if you're going to challenge it, you can challenge them, but not an election that's already underway. And then you're going to, what I think people might be missing about this process is whatever actions, and there may well be an action filed in federal court as well. I think the one that has a greater chance is one filed in state court.
Let's talk about that for a moment. So somebody files it. What's the relief? What does the court do? So say there's a plaintiff, and the plaintiff files a case against, I guess it would be against the General Assembly.
Right.
And maybe the governor, maybe some others. And then let's assume that it gets accepted by the South Carolina Supreme Court in its original jurisdiction. What is the relief that a plaintiff would ask for? And what is the potential immediate relief? Because we got an election ongoing here. We have early voting. You've got a primary proper coming up. So what is asked for, and what is the relief that the Supreme Court can or could give?
All right, I think ultimately one thing that could be asked for is for the court to reject the map that we might pass on Wednesday. And just
So an injunction.
Right. The other could be to say, okay, you can do that, but you can't apply it to this election. You can have this map, but it won't take effect until 2028 because we refuse to enjoin the election, okay?
So first of all, the first option would be to enjoin the maps outright and let the elections proceed based on current maps.
You're either going to enjoin the map or you're going to enjoin the election. I mean, you can join the June primary. You could say, the court could say, we are declaring that the congressional race in the June primary is not going to take place, and it can go ahead in August. That would be if it were if the lawsuit were rejected. That's what would happen. Okay. If they enjoined the map, they might just temporarily enjoin the map and saying it doesn't apply to the June primary, but it can go forward next time there's a congressional race. But there's only so much relief that the court can grant. And in the, I guess the simple terms, they're either going to let the election go forward in June and refuse to stop the voting on the grounds of the several federal cases that said basically that this map that you pass comes too late. You may have legislative authority to pass this map, but you don't have legislative authority to upset an ongoing election. That'd be one possibility. The other possibility that may be asked for is that maybe the map that we're going to send to them violates the principles set forth in Alexander. I do think that you're going to have several potential plaintiff scenarios. One might be from military votes. One might be from absentee votes. One might be from early voters, because there are going to be people in an early voter class by then whose votes they've already cast their votes. You may actually have one filed by a candidate who says, look, I've spent all this money based on this race, and it'd be totally unfair to me and the people that I represent to go forward.
As I understand it, that in order for a court, the Supreme Court, to issue an injunction to any party, there would have to be a showing of irreparable harm and a showing of a likelihood to succeed on the merits. That's right. And so I guess the issue presented to the state Supreme Court by the plaintiff in the first instance, and then I would suppose by the defendant in the second instance, both asking for injunctions. I assume the plaintiff would be asking for an injunction in regard to the maps. The responding party, the state, may be asking for an injunction in regard to the congressional primaries because they want them to be held in August. And so each side would then be required to show A, irreparable harm, and B, a likelihood of proceeding on the merits before the court would take action in either case. Is that correct?
Yes, although, I mean, there's a distinction between a preliminary injunction or a temporary restraining order and then a full injunction, and usually the difference is the process by which a hearing takes place. Because what the court's going to have before it at the time that I guess it's asked to enjoin the map, or if the response comes and asks to enjoin the voting on Tuesday. I mean, I guess when this bill takes effect, it's going to say in the terms of the bill that we're not going to have congressional elections in June.
In August 14th, whatever it is.
Right. And the court would enjoin that either on the grounds that it comes too late or there's no likelihood of success. I mean, when I say it comes too late, there'd be irreparable harm created, or you're not going to win on this on the merits, so we're not going to do it. But inherent in that process is, in fact, a process, which typically would be that somebody files an action in the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, and they serve the parties. The parties in this case are going to be probably the president, the speaker, the election commission, maybe the governor. And so now you've invoked, depending on how many parties you named, you got 4 sets of respondent lawyers. You got 1 set of petitioner lawyers. Unless there are multiple cases filed on Tuesday.
That's
you
the
could
other
have the
possibility.
absentee ballot case filed, you could have the military case filed, you could potentially have somebody else filed.
Early voter-
And so
early voter file?
what I'm telling you is the Supreme Court might be faced with 3 petitions for original jurisdiction, all coming in the door after midnight on Tuesday. All right, somebody's got to read those, right? You know, the law clerks are burning the candles, reading those, and generally speaking, the first thing that the court will do is they will set a briefing schedule. And they will say, we have received these, they may have merit, we ask whichever side to give us a brief within, and they could truncate it, and I mean, normally it's like a week, right?
And that's likely to be
But
ordered
I would
without
think
there
it would
being a
be-
temporary injunction? This is so before they can decide whether
I mean, is it possible to enter in a restraining order or temporary injunction on the pleadings?
on the pleadings themselves.
You could. That would be, I would think, and I think it'd be highly unlikely in this scenario, although to be effective, but the thing is, if you enjoin the June elections, you can't go back and unring that bell, right? And so I think there's going to be a certain default to, hey,
They're not
people are
enjoining.
right, to people are voted, their vote's in the box. Before we decide that there's a meritorious claim, we'd like a little bit of briefing on that. So and they could really truncate. I don't think they'd give you 6 hours, but I think that what they're not going to do is they're not going to summons all the lawyers over to the Supreme Court and sit them at the different tables and say, stand up and make your argument. They're not going to do that.
Right.
Because the respondents, even though they might anticipate what these lawsuits are going to say, they're not going to have time to have done some legal research and written a meaningful brief. And if anything we know about a truncated process is you get a bad result. I mean, that's what we're involved in right now. So they're going to say 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours. And then the other side, they're going to say, now you get another 24 hours to respond. And typically what they would say is, we would like y'all to be in our chambers on Saturday for oral arguments. And then they're going to have to hear those and digest them. And then they're going to have to write an order. That part of the process may take as long or longer than the part of the process we've just engaged in.
And all the while, there's
All
early
while
voting.
either people are voting or they've enjoined the election and you can't unring that bell. And what if they do enjoin the election and then after they've read everything says, you know, you really don't have a chance of winning. You can't go back and say, okay, everybody go back and pretend, just turn the clock back and pretend it's June. I think there is going to be an inference that the elections that were set in law go forward, okay? I could be wrong about that. Obviously, I'm not on the Supreme Court, don't want to be on the Supreme Court, but I think that the notion that that these elections that have been scheduled out way in advance, that people have filed timely, they've conducted campaigns, military ballots are out, absentee votes are in, early vote has been ongoing. There is going to be a high bar, a real high bar, to shut that off based on just a quick review of the pleadings that they would read for the first time after midnight on Tuesday or Wednesday morning or whenever it might be, okay?
All right, let me, so while this is going on, take me over to the federal court and what might happen in the federal court. Would the issues be joined differently? Would there be different timetables? Would be different briefing?
I think the federal court case would be more in the line of, does this map adhere to the principles set forth in the Louisiana case? It would be, I don't think the federal courts, I think the higher likelihood that the stopping or starting of the election is going to take place is going to happen across the street. Not to say that the federal courts don't have equal jurisdiction with that, but they also tend to move more slowly in their process, and I'm not that familiar with it, but I don't think their process for issuing an injunction or getting involved are as nimble as the folks across the street. If it's going to happen. I mean, if it's going to happen, it's more likely to come from our Supreme Court. And quite frankly, I think it ought to, I mean, whatever the ruling is, I'm sort of with you on that. South Carolina should control South Carolina's destiny on things like this. And I would feel much more comfortable, whichever way it goes, getting a ruling from our Supreme Court because they've already heard Alexander, right? They've already thought through this process. They've already looked at the map that's being upset. And actually, they're going to have actually be looking at a map that they've blessed and being asked to say that something was wrong with it when they've already ruled that nothing's wrong with it. That in fact, they did. And they, I think, are going to be emboldened by the fact that the U.S. Supreme Court cited their work with approval. I mean, you know, it's not like I said, if there had been a footnote in the Louisiana case saying, based on our ruling today, the rulings in cases, including the Alexander case in South Carolina, may need to be looked at again. They didn't say that. In fact, they said almost the opposite of that was, we are basing our decision today that the Louisiana case needs to be revisited based on the work that the South Carolina Supreme Court did in Alexander. So if I'm the South Carolina Supreme Court, I'm thinking, wait a minute, they said we did good work. Why if we did good work, would we want to take, and then they might look at the process. It'd be different if the process was that we had been debating this for 2 months and had come up with a process.
Right.
But if that had happened, we would have probably had done something way back to stop the vote. You know, because we could have passed a bill. There's nothing that says we have to always vote the primary in June. We could have passed a bill in March and say we've moved the primaries to August to give us time to consider redrawing a map, but we didn't do that. And the fact that we've already sent out ballots and people have responded to those ballots, and particularly military families and absentee folks that we know aren't going to be here, because it's going to be hard. Like I said, you can't go back. If you stop the June election, you can't later say I made a mistake about that. It would probably be easier to let the election go forward, and then if you find that it's meritorious, invalidate the June election for Congress and then say, we're going to do a redo in August, than to stop it. If you stop it, you can't start it back. If you let it go forward, and ultimately you decide, the legislature's probably did have the power to do this, so we're going to invalidate that election and set up a new, and let the process go forward. I mean, I'm just thinking out loud here
Sure, no,
about how that would work, but what I do know is our courts, I think all courts, but I know our court takes their work seriously, and they're not going to try and just willy-nilly throw out an opinion to be throwing out an opinion. And I also know that our court doesn't duck hard cases, okay? I mean, they reversed the Murdoch conviction. They reversed our pay raise. I mean, they're not looking for an off-ramp.
Struck down the heartbeat bill first time.
I mean, exactly.
Yeah.
They're not looking for an off-ramp. They're willing to accept the responsibility of being that third branch of government that guards jealously what's been given to them. And what's been given to them is to thoughtfully look at cases that come before them. And if it involves legislative action, they take that seriously, and they're going to take a look at it. So I just think that the odds, I mean, there's all this rush to get it to them by Tuesday or Wednesday. I sort of think the cow's out of the barn on that. I mean, really, I think unless we got it to them by like last Friday and gave them a briefing schedule of this week to come up with something, there would be a higher likelihood they might do something, particularly in light of the fact that Alexander was cited approvingly in the Louisiana case.
Thank you for taking the time to answer my questions, Senator from Orangeburg. I appreciate it very much. Send me the bill.
All right. So with that, Mr. President, I would move that the Senate do now adjourn. Okay, I'm sorry. I would withdraw that and ask unanimous consent that we read the box.
Is there objection to the unanimous consent request to go to the box and read the box? Hearing no objection, thank you. So ordered. Thank you, Senator from Orangeburg. We have returned to the box. The reading clerk will read.
Message from the House, Mr. President, members of the Senate. The report of Committee of Conference having been adopted by both houses and S. 688, a bill by Senators Massey and Kimbrell, amending the code relating to contributions and payments to the unemployment trust fund definitions, having been read 3 times in each house, it was ordered that the title thereof be changed to that of an act and that it be enrolled for ratification.
This message is being received as information. Reading clerk will continue to read.
Introduction of a concurrent resolution by Senator Grooms. It requests the Department of Transportation name a portion of French Quarter Creek Bridge on Cainhoy Road in UG in Berkeley County, William Ellington Sr. Bridge, erect appropriate signs and markers.
It's referred to the Transportation Committee.
Introduction of a Senate resolution by Senator Jackson. It's to honor Macy Edward Christopher Chris Weber III for his remarkable basketball career, his contributions to education and commentary, and his enduring positive influence on generations of young people, declared June 5th, 2026 as Chris Weber Day in South Carolina.
The resolution is referred to the Education Committee.
Introduction of House Bill 4737. This bill adds a section to the code so as to create a mandatory orientation training program for new members of the boards of trustees of public universities of higher learning.
The bill is referred to the Education Committee.
House has returned to the Senate with amendments S 1043, bill by Senator Adams and others, enacting the Civil Air Patrol Leave Act.
This is placed on the calendar.
Message from the governor. Mr. President, members of the Senate, I'm hereby vetoing and returning without my approval S 420H, which is a bill amending the code relating to the jurisdiction for offenses involving checks and penalties.
The bill will be placed on the calendar.
Further message from the governor, Mr. President, members of the Senate. I'm hereby vetoing and returning without my approval S 238. This is a bill amending the code relating to adjournment of the General Assembly and conditions for the extended session.
The bill will be placed on the calendar.
Newberry County delegation reports favorable additional appointment of a Newberry County magistrate, Miss Brianna Hawkins Ergel of Prosperity.
The pending question is confirmation of the Newberry County magistrate. All in favor of that motion would say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Senator from Berkeley, Senator Grooms, what purpose do you rise?
Is the box clear?
I'm informed that the desk is clear.
Mr. President, I move that we take a 5-minute recess.
Motion is we take a 5-minute recess. All in favor would say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. We will recede for 5 minutes.